So back in March of last year, I was hired to make a video game. My client, Alex, had never made one before, so it was my goal to make his idea come to life. I think I'll start with explaining the game as it is now, so you can sort of follow along the journey of the game. I'll be going over from the development from the very early stages when we first started talking, so from the very first prototype up into the early access release. The game is based on a shopkeeper called Glenn. He has basically been hired by someone called Jade. He's really the only sort of employee that works there. He gets all the stuff thrown at him, loads of tasks to complete. He's got to manage loads of different elements that you would have to manage really at a terrible retail job. And the goal for Glenn really is just to get through his last week's notice before he eventually leaves this job. But yeah, his boss Jade is keeping him around for this last week of work, and he's just got to get through it. So in the game, there are actually only 5 shifts that you've got to complete. This might sound pretty simple, but once you hear about the game, it's definitely not. So yeah, Glenn has his task list to complete in general in the store in order to get to the next shift. But yeah, even after completing your task, you still have to meet Jade's expectations. This includes doing extra jobs and stuff like that. But that isn't the only thing that Glenn has to manage. He has to manage his stress levels. Your stress increases for a number of reasons. There's a till lady called Shirley who is requesting things that she needs, and if she doesn't get them, she'll get angry, and Glenn's stress will then eventually increase. And the main source of stress will come from customers. They will bump into you, chase after you if they slip over some rubbish that you've left on the floor. They will just try and stress you out as much as they can. And if your stress reaches the max level, you get too stressed, you pass out, and it's a game over. You also have to drink, like we all do, so he has to go to the water dispenser if his hydration levels get too low. And then, as we all do as well, we have to obviously wee. So when he drinks too much, Glenn's bladder will fill up, and then you have to go to the toilet. So these are the 3 main things that you've sort of got to manage throughout your time on a shift. There is a lot of curveballs in this game, so each shift is very, very different. I don't want to spoil too many things about the game, but yeah, a lot of stuff happens. Robots get involved. It all gets a bit mad, so just bear that in mind. I won't spoil too much. You have to play the game for yourself to see the robots and how it all unfolds. And there also is a few Easter eggs throughout each shift. So there's an Easter egg on every shift that you have to try and find. They're all hidden, so I won't spoil them either. See if you can find them. And then you unlock a secret ending also for Glenn if you find all the Easter eggs. There is upgrades in this game also, so when Glenn eventually passes out or loses a shift, he then goes back to this place called the Void, which is basically in Glenn's head, and he can buy upgrades that he can take into the next shift with him. And if you fail a shift, as it's a roguelike, you just start from the very first shift again. So you can buy upgrades to sort of help you get through the 5 shifts. You only have a limited amount, so you got to use them very wisely. So yeah, that is the main concept of the game. It is very, very hectic. Played it day in, day out, and I still find it fun. Every run is completely different. Something always messes up, or I somehow fail, even though I've played it a million times. So yeah, I thought I would take you through my game making process of the whole thing, like a big devlog really. And it was great looking back on all the clips that I recorded as well. Super interesting to follow, and yeah, hopefully you guys enjoy. So yeah, let's start from the very beginning. At the beginning, we had the shifts all sort of flow together. We had like a constant timer on the screen, and like once the shift was over, the player would have to leave the store, like just physically, you just have to walk out with the controls, and then walk onto the street and go back home. Now, initially this sounded like a pretty good idea, right? But eventually sort of didn't really make much sense. The flow of the game, didn't really have any sort of breaks for the player. It seemed like we couldn't really break up the gameplay very easily, and like the power-ups that we had in mind, just we couldn't slot them into the gameplay, in a nice, smooth way. This idea sort of fizzled out. It would have been cool to have, Glenn have his own little house he can go back to, but again, for the scope of the project as well, it was just sort of a bit out of reach for us, so we decided to sort of revert this and sort of go for a more structured approach. But yeah, as you can see, the game early on is just obviously all blocks. It's not very exciting to look at this early on. It had that quite high top-down camera view, wasn't very zoomed in, wasn't very sort of immersive in a sense. It was sort of going to be more, bird's eye view of the whole thing, which, at the time we thought would be a good idea, but we inevitably changed that. And Glenn, at this point, he couldn't really pick up many things. He could only pick up one item at a time. We found that being, pretty slow. This was a mechanic that I was just currently working on a previous game that I thought I would, implement into this one. But yeah, Glenn only being able to carry one thing. The gameplay was quite slow, I figured, and yeah, this eventually got changed as well. We had a simple stress bar implemented at this point. We didn't have the hydration or bladder at this point, but yeah, we had a simple stress bar, and it would increase if you bumped into a customer, sorry. We had the basic customers in also. They would try and bump into you, but at this point they were very simple AI. In fact, I don't think they even chased you at this point. I think they just had patrol points. So yeah, we were just sort of trying to get some sort of prototypes together, sort of get the idea down on paper in a sense, and just sort of like, yeah, okay, we can see it now. Does it work okay? And, you know, what can we add to this really basic template of the game idea? At this point, Glenn only had one task to complete also. There wasn't much depth in the game. We did have a basic till lady in as well. This idea sort of developed quite early on. We had bags and money that were on the floor in a separate room of the store, but again, we really didn't know how to sort of implement these, you know, organically. The mechanics seemed a bit, I don't know, forced at the time, but we sort of eventually implemented, you know, some safes that they would be stored in and have a dedicated room and stuff like that. But at this early stage, you know, that's very much basic. And yeah, that was basically it at this point. We were pretty happy with this, but again, the game idea itself still had a lot of development to do. You'll find a lot over this process that me and Alex sort of changed the idea quite often. That was one of the big issues that we both faced, really. We were sort of constantly back and forth changing things, but we did obviously eventually land on something in the end. Okay, around about the 3 to 4 month mark now, so we're getting a little bit further into development at this point. Just got past that prototype stage now, where we're sort of thinking deeper about the game, thinking about how the mechanics can sort of link together a little bit more, adding that little bit more polish to the UI and the sort of game environment, really thinking about where things need to go, thinking about what needs to be on screen and what doesn't need to be on screen. So as you can see quite early on, there was quite a lot of clutter on the screen. We really wanted to sort of minimize this. We felt like there was, you know, too much information for the player to sort of, you know, absorb. This started by a little bit of a weird mechanic in a sense, where I thought I would implement like a watch that the player could sort of look at. So almost if like Glenn had a watch on that he could click on and sort of, you know, open up. But then I realized the player's probably going to want to know what the time is of the shift, because that's, you know, quite important information. Yeah, we ended up just keeping the clock on there, but, you know, the date and the time and stuff wasn't actually necessary at this point now, because, you know, we changed the game idea from it, you know, flowing and sort of Glenn having to leave the store and knowing what time it is all of the time. We only need to know what it is for that specific shift. So yeah, we sort of removed all that useless information, a lot less clutter on the screen now. So yeah, previously in the first like prototype build, I didn't actually mention this, but we had the apples and the lemons that were in the sort of stock room. They were just like spawning in there. They weren't really sort of delivered. So at this point in the game, we decided to sort of have a truck that would deliver crates with stock in them, and then Glenn can sort of go up to them and punch the crate, and then all the items would fall out of it. This mechanic is stuck now to the, you know, early access build, something that we've kept and refined. And then obviously we'd have to change the, you know, ability for Glenn to only pick up one item. We made a little basic inventory system, so you can now carry 3 items at a time, and then you've got your power-up slots underneath that as well. So yeah, this moves on to the tasks as well. So I did implement this feature where you would have sort of bonus tasks. So if you would complete them in a certain order, so the bonus task would be, you know, the color red. If you complete the red task, you get bonus money or score. And obviously at this point we had the basic score system in as well, so you got to reach a certain amount of score to get to the next shift. This was the original idea. We end up changing the task quite a bit and how they look and how they actually work. This was the first idea, but again, we found this to be quite too complicated in a sense where the player's got too many things to think about already. They don't need to be thinking about what task is the bonus one and stuff like that. So yeah, we ended up removing this feature. But yeah, at this point the shop layout is now changed. We've got a really nice layout, but you can't really see it because we've changed the camera angle. It's a little bit of a more immersive camera angle now. We're a little bit zoomed in on the character. This makes it a lot harder to see the customers come in as well, which is quite good. Makes you feel like you're controlling Glenn more than just observing Glenn in a way, so it makes you feel a little bit more immersed. And another important mechanic is the clock-in machine. Glenn has to clock in at work in order to earn money. Now this is if you've ever worked retail or sort of any job, you sort of got to sort of clock in to let them know that you're there, and then you start earning money. And yeah, basically once you're clocked in, yeah, your money starts going up at a very slow rate. If you can, especially if you've ever worked retail, you can you know, relate to this. It's one of the most important things you have to do in this game in order to earn money, to eventually then spend on the power-ups. And finally, at this point in the game, we had safes that you could go collect bags and cash from, and then obviously deliver them to the till lady. Till lady was a separate mechanic from the tasks at one point, but then we ended up implementing her into just being a part of the task list. This was another sort of change that we had to make because we felt it was a little bit too much. We just thought we would integrate it all into the one system instead. Oh, and one more thing for this for this little stage of development, we added banana peels in. This was a mechanic that I was quite proud of, in a sense of implementing the stun mechanic for it. The player, if he walks over a banana peel, would get stunned and slide for a little bit. He'll be froze for like a split second. Feels quite cool to play, and later on when you see the animations for it, it's pretty funny. And these banana peels also aggro the customers, so if they slip over one, they will chase after you. So yeah, the AI is getting a little bit better now. They're sort of chasing the player, and their patrol points are a little bit more random. So yeah, it's all coming together at this point. Obviously, it still blocks and it still looks a bit, yeah, we do at this point make a lot of changes to the mechanics and design choices, but yeah, it's just also super cool to look back on. So yeah, this was a good point in development.